Hope this works. Hey, how are you? It worked. It is Sunday afternoon, early Sunday afternoon, October 2nd at 12:45. Your Purdue Boilermakers have improved to 3-2 by beating Minnesota in Minneapolis 20-10. I'm going to talk about it in just a second, but first let me thank my sponsors. Shout out to Martin Vintage, martinvintage.com. Enter Boiled at checkout. Get Purdue style and classic graphics from a Purdue family. Enter Boiled. Get a little bit of a discount. Head over there, martinvintage.com. And of course, when you're on campus, go to AJ's on Vine. Grab a sandwich, grab a pint. Watch some television, watch some football, get some mac and cheese bites. It's okay. Live a little. It's a weekend already. EatAJ's.com. Good food, another Purdue company. Purdue got the victory yesterday in Minnesota in just the way you all thought it would happen, right? They outmuscled and out-toughed and outrushed the Minnesota Golden Gophers. And coming into the game, Minnesota looked like a bit of a juggernaut. So a couple things we know now that we might not have known quite as well coming into the game. First one, Michigan State's really not very good at football. They got beaten again yesterday. One of the things that kind of was the basis, the blocks of building a case for Minnesota was how thoroughly they beat Michigan State. And Michigan State's not the team that a lot of people thought. I think Minnesota is a pretty good team still. Minnesota was out without Ibrahim, which is a big deal. He's a very, very good running back. He was injured. He tried to give it a go. He couldn't. The odd thing to me the whole day is they kept showing him on the sideline with his chin strap buckled and his helmet on. Mo, my man, next time you're not going to play, you can take your helmet off and just take it a little bit easier. It looked like he was on call and he thought he was going to have to play. I love Ibrahim. I think he's a great running back. I was happy to see he couldn't play versus Purdue just because I fear that guy. I think he's one of the best in the nation. Is that the reason Purdue won? It's part of it. But bigger than that, so you had two teams. I said this on Twitter. You had two teams that their identity is predicated on really one guy on the field right now, offensively. Purdue really needs Aiden O'Connell to sling the ball, put it in tight windows, take the risk that he's so good at taking, get the ball out of his hands quickly, which he's good at. That's what Purdue's offense is all about. They throw the ball around the field. And Minnesota, they really run the ball better than anybody. They got big linemen. They've got a system that is, they got a run-pass option quarterback in Tanner Morgan, who's fine, but he's not great. And when he has to pass a lot, they're in trouble. They leaned heavily on their backup running backs. They are not as talented as Ibrahim, and it showed. So you had two teams performing a rock fight for 3/4 of the game. Purdue started the game very, very well. The first drive went right down the field, and it was running the ball. It was Dylan Downing. It was Maccabee just doing big things, and Purdue pushed the ball right down the field. I think in that drive, O'Connell had 2 or 3 completed passes as well. But he's not the guy that he usually is. He looks dinged up. But that drive was brilliantly designed. I think the Braum brothers, whoever was in charge of putting that design drive together, those pre-planned plays, Purdue had practiced those, and they made a statement early. They got on the board. But pretty quickly, you could see some of that stuff was not going to work. When Purdue would get the ball back, they tried to run the ball. Running the ball wasn't working. Minnesota made a horrible mistake early, and it was on the coaching. It was on the sideline. They decided to go for it on 4th and 2, I believe, on the 30, on the other 30, and they didn't make it. Purdue received a gift of a possession very early in the game because of Minnesota's and specifically PJ Fleck's hubris, and Purdue only got 3 points out of that. Later in the game, Purdue had an interception, I believe, or received a fumble. Can't remember. It was a turnover. They got no points out of that. Even later in that first half, Minnesota missed a field goal. Purdue got no points out of that. So you got 3 gift possessions where Purdue got a total of 3 points. On the other side of the ball, Minnesota had 2 gift possessions. One of them was the result of a fumble. I believe it was Maccabee. And the other one was a interception. O'Connell threw a bad interception into quad coverage, if I remember that one correctly. And Minnesota came away with 3 points from those two gift possessions. The teams were similar in that they were playing really sloppy, crappy offensive football both ways. Tanner Morgan never looked like he got into rhythm. When he was forced late in the game to pass, he didn't look tack sharp. He didn't look like the guy that just went absolutely crazy on Purdue 15, 20 years ago when he first started at quarterback in Minnesota. He's been there a long time. I think it's his 6th year, but I think he started right out of the gates, if I'm remembering correctly. So he's actually started for 5 seasons because of the COVID year. That's a little bit different than OConnell, who had to kind of ease his way in there because he was a fallback, remember, because of injuries to both Blau and Sindelar a couple years ago. Both of them experienced quarterbacks. But OConnell, let's revisit this, didn't look great. I can read your stats, but I can tell you a lot of them without reading them. He had 199 yards passing. He completed, where is it? He completed 27 of 40, so 67%, which isn't horrible. 199 yards is abnormally low for him, but this is where it really gets dicey. 0 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, and the 2 interceptions were pretty bad. He didn't look like himself. On the other side of the ball, Tanner Morgan, I was just referencing this, he had more completions, lower completion percentage than OConnell. 3 interceptions, 0 touchdowns. So the quarterbacks weren't doing their jobs. How were the running backs doing? And so this is where Purdue really spaced themselves. This is where Purdue won the game. And that is really in the last drive of the game. The first drive, the last drive of the game for Purdue. The first real drive and the first drive and the last real drive for Purdue were bookended. Devin Mockabee was important both. Dylan Downing was important the first one. I think that's the run where he came left side off tackle, and a lot of Tennessee fans hated to see that play because honestly, Payne Durham gets the assist on that touchdown by really dragging Downing into the end zone. I think that's the picture I chose for this post today. And I do think it was an illegal aiding of a running back. You can push guys. You can get them in a group and push them forward. That's legal. You cannot pull a running back. And Payne Durham started pulling it, and he kind of fell forward, and I think he grabbed him and pulled him in. Pretty good effort by Payne Durham, but I'm sure Tennessee fans didn't like to see that, and that makes me laugh in itself. So Devin Mockabee, though, he gets my game ball. That one, I think it was a 65-yard run. I think it's 65-yard run. Really, it took the game out of balance. Great play right up the middle. I was happy he was going to get the first down. That was really what I was focusing on because Purdue gets the first down. They were up 3 at that point. And you guys have heard this, and you probably felt the same way I did. Purdue up 3 with the ball late in the game. Jeff Brom's not going to take any risk. Minnesota's probably going to get it back. And I said coming into the Minnesota drive before, Purdue made them punt. Purdue gets the ball back, another chance to seal the game. And I said, when Minnesota got that ball the first time, I said, is this the drive for the West Division of the Big Ten? Because it looks like the West is pretty weak. Iowa got beaten by Michigan pretty handily, just kind of a workman-like win for Michigan. Wisconsin continues to look bad. Northwestern lost in torrential rain in Happy Valley. Purdue beat Minnesota. Illinois, that was a surprising game. Illinois beat Wisconsin. That was a very surprising game. The way they beat them too, they beat them soundly. So who knows? Maybe it's an Illinois-Purdue battle. Purdue's got a lot of football to play, but they really needed to win this game to make those games important later in the year. But anyway, so Maccabee's coming up the middle, and it looks like he's going to be able to fall forward, get the first down, keep that drive going, and Purdue can take some time off the clock. Instead, he made a very unusual jump cut. He jumps to his right, kind of I always say he looks a bit like a baby deer when he runs because his legs are so long, but he makes this jump cut, and then he turns left because he beats one guy, and he turns on the Jets, and he goes up that left sideline, takes it all the way down to the 3. I think he scored 2 plays later or 1 play later. Devin Mockabee really showed why I like him. He showed why a lot of people like him and why he probably shouldn't relinquish the number 1 running back role because of that big play, because of that big play potential. He's a home run hitter, as they say, when you want to cross your sports metaphors. He's a home run hitter. He's a guy that can go big on a team because of his speed. He gets out and open. He's very dangerous. He also, we've seen he can catch the ball, and we've seen he can finish runs, and he is just getting started. He is young. He's a redshirt freshman. So Purdue could have 3 more years of watching Devin Mockabee do big things. Dylan Downey, he averaged 3.2 yards a carry. That second and third quarter, he struggled getting loose because Purdue's offensive line wasn't creating much space for him. But Mockabee finishes the game with 112 yards. That's the second game in a row Purdue has had a 100-yard rusher. Pretty weird, pretty cool. Let's give credit to the offensive line right now. Right now. Sure, Florida Atlantic isn't Minnesota, especially in the trenches. I know that. Florida Atlantic got pounded yesterday, by the way. If you're into that sort of thing, when you think, how good was this team? Florida Atlantic's not very good. They got beaten by Texas State or North Texas. Sorry, I really don't know. But they got beaten. They got beaten pretty soundly. Purdue, that game was close because Purdue was trying to figure out what they're going to do on offense with a different quarterback. This game versus Minnesota was played at Minnesota's pace, and it felt like Purdue was setting themselves up to lose a heartbreaker as they could not take advantage of opportunities. Don't get me wrong, Minnesota couldn't take advantage of those opportunities either, but there are a couple key plays that really made it happen. One, of course, Maccabee's massive run that I just talked about. But the other one, Cam Allen had a huge interception that stopped a drive that felt like it was going to, I think that's at the end of the first half. It looked like Minnesota was going to score. Instead, it ends on a turnover. I think Cam Allen, if I'm remembering correctly, I think he had 2 interceptions, but I might be wrong. 1 interception. Nope, 2 interceptions. I was right. And then he had the one late in the game where he sealed that drive where it really said, okay, this game's over. It's over. Right after Mockabee scored his touchdown, put Purdue up 10. Cam Allen, that next drive, has an interception. Also, Wahlberg played great again. Wahlberg had 4 tackles. He had an interception to add. And then on top of him, of course, if you would have guessed this, you're a damn genius. But Bryce Hampton led the team in tackles with 7. Branson Dean had a solid game, 6 tackles. And Fakasieki had 8 tackles. He played really, really well. And the big thing is the thing that Purdue's strong at, that we can admit or we can say with confidence now, is Purdue's trenches are strong on both sides. That's a big deal. That really won the game. Purdue's defensive backs continue to struggle tackling opponents in the open field. It was a real problem yesterday. It was something that I think you can definitely say it's not going away. It doesn't look like to me. It'd be awfully hard to say it's going away because it keeps happening time and time again. But that front, Purdue's ability to stop the run up the gut is a big deal, and that's a prototypical Big Ten type of offense to run the ball up the gut, especially teams like Minnesota, teams like Wisconsin, who they play here in a couple weeks. It'll be interesting versus a team like Maryland because Maryland is going to spread the ball around. Maryland is fast on the outside. It's going to test Purdue's defensive backs. The best thing that could happen, and I pray it does, if Purdue can get Graham back, it's going to be a huge difference maker because he can do so many different things. And Jefferson's done a good job in his stead. Hampton has done a little bit of that as well. But really, Jefferson has been the key to holding down the fort as Graham is on the mend. Let's get back to Aiden O'Connell real quickly, and then I'm going to look at some questions or comments in the margin. Looks like got a lot of people. Appreciate for you guys tuning in live. And I'm going to tell you about the title here in a second, if you haven't figured it out already. But Aiden O'Connell did not look right. We knew that morning he was going to give it a go. I think he's struggling through an injury that's a little bit tougher than I thought it was, but I don't think it's one where you have tears. I think he is banged up and bruised up and maybe has some strained. I'm not going to talk too much about what I think it is, but I just think he's not going to be the same player for a few weeks. I think he's going to have to get well in a hurry for Purdue to actually, I take that back. For Purdue to go 3-1, which some of you guys called me an idiot, literally, some of you called me that, for an idiot for saying it was a possibility or that should be their goal in October. Purdue can go 3-1 in October. But for them to go 3-1 in October, I think the most difficult game, I believe, is Maryland. And I think it's going to be difficult because Purdue's going to have to get into a shootout. Purdue's offense does not look like it's ready to get into a shootout with a team right now. Maryland's defense, though, is good at letting teams get in a shootout. But Purdue's defense has had the ability to slow teams down. They've really done a very, very good job at that, except for Honestly, the fourth quarter versus Syracuse and the fourth quarter versus Penn State. That's really encouraging. But Maryland will sling the ball around. If Tunga Viola, Tua's brother, is healthy, that's a big positive for Maryland, because that he's going to define how good that offense is. Obviously, he's snake bitten with injuries. He's a bit like Penix. It's hard to perform with a broken Penix. You guys have heard me say that on Twitter. Who's very good at Washington. Suffered his first loss of the season, I think, on Friday night. But yeah, he's a bit like Penix because he has to run the ball quite regularly. And in the Big Ten, that is a brutal assignment to have a quarterback that his first weapon is with his feet. It's really not in his case. He's really a very good passer. He can spread it around. He's got a lot of athletic receivers. So that's the game. If I was circling one that is scary right now, it's that, because it goes Maryland's strength versus Purdue's weakness. Purdue's weakness, of course, making tackles for yards after catch. Purdue's defensive backfield clearly is pretty good at rising the occasion and turning the ball over, getting teams to turn the ball over. It's not just a coincidence that this keeps happening, that Purdue's defensive backs come up with interceptions when it matters. They're good at that. They are not good at open field tackling, though. There's no other way to say it. They miss Jalen Graham. He is extremely important. He covers up so many weaknesses for a team because he's so rangy and he's so strong. They need him back. So hopefully he'll be back soon. So let me look at the comments here. I'm about 16 minutes. I want to get done here in the next couple. Todd Singer says, great defensive effort. Yeah, Todd, I'm not sure if you give the game ball to defense, but that was awesome. They did exactly what you want a team to do in closing that game out. I would give the game ball, like I said, to Devin Mockabee. I think he was awesome. But also, if I'm going to give a second game ball out, it's the offensive line. They literally wore Minnesota out, it felt like, because they were able to bust up holes at the end of the game. And all you need to do it was once. And that's the thing about when you wear a team out, right? When you're just kind of leaning on them and leaning on them and leaning on them over and over and over. Like both those teams were, both big, strong teams in the trenches. But Purdue was able to do it one play, and that really made the difference. And it kind of broke Minnesota. Mockabee punches it in 2 plays later or 1 play later. So Ruda Chris said this on Twitter. It feels weird to be on the other side of a collapse at the end of the game. Yeah, I don't know. And I remember reading you say that, Chris. I don't know if I'd say that Minnesota collapsed. I mean, Purdue had a big play, but for me, for Minnesota to collapse, they had to be in the lead. Like that, maybe I'm dealing with semantics, and you guys can disagree with me. But if Purdue was up 3 and they lose that game, that's Purdue's collapse, right? And I felt like that was going to happen. I think we all did. I heard Jeff Brom's comments to his team. I haven't watched any of the media stuff yet. I might have a quick cast in a couple days after I've ingested all that. But his comments to his team after the game were really, nobody outside the Purdue family believed in you. You guys heard us. We are diehard Purdue fans, and we are having a hard time believing Purdue could beat Minnesota because the way the teams were set up and designed. But boy, it's great. You saw my stupid grin if you're on Twitter after the game when I said I'll be doing a post game here in the next day. But when I get surprised like that, I'm in a great mood, and that was fun to see Purdue pull out a game in improbable fashion. Ted Berkey says, do you think playing Penn State and Syracuse before this game opposed to 4 cupcakes like Minnesota helped Purdue? Yeah, I do, but it also hurt them, right? Let's see. Here's why I say that. It helps them because they're battle-tested. Purdue is definitely a battle-tested team. They lost 2 of those battles, but now they've won 2 of those close game battles. That's a big deal. And learning how to flip it your way is a hard thing. That goes to the coaches. I know a lot of Purdue fans have disparaged Jeff Brom this season, rightfully so, for the team looking sluggish out of the gates. The Syracuse game is the hardest one to swallow. I'm going to talk to you guys about expectations here in a second, see if you guys agree. So it helps Purdue to play those difficult teams. There's no doubt. But it hurts them too, and I'll tell you why. Because OConnell was injured and had to sit out a game because of playing Syracuse. He got hit a lot that game, and that's because he played a good front that blitzes a lot. So it helps and it hurts. I would much prefer, if I could pick an ideal schedule, I'd say you want to play a cupcake right out of the gates and get that garbage out of your system, be able to have the wiggle room, but Sadly, the Big Ten, I think, has stepped in on schedules, and so many teams play their first game as a conference foe. That's awfully hard. And it's almost the exact opposite if you think about the way the SEC protects itself. I know the SEC, you look at the SEC, a lot of those teams have front-loaded weak games, and then they have that really weak game in the middle. They, by design, they'll play a lower division team, and it helps them get healthy for the home stretch. The Big Ten, though, starting out with a I think half the conference does it. Started out with a conference foe. It's really difficult. They're fun atmospheres. I mean, the Northwestern game was a fun atmosphere. The Penn State game was a fun atmosphere. Purdue has not come out on top on those yet. I don't think. I don't think they've won a first game conference game. Maybe you guys can correct me if I'm wrong. So, okay, let me talk about expectations coming into this season. When I looked at those first 5 games, I really thought Penn State was a coin flip. Turns out it was a coin flip. I didn't think Syracuse was a coin flip because I was basing it on what Syracuse had been the previous season. I thought Purdue would beat Syracuse. And I thought they'd beat, of course, Indiana State and FAU. And then I thought they'd lose to Minnesota. And the reason I thought they'd lose to Minnesota is because that history, until a team shows me they can do it, which Purdue showed me yesterday. They showed me they can go toe-to-toe with a big, strong team and beat them at their game. That was a big deal. It's a big deal. That's a big deal for those big. Purdue is a big, strong team. I said this before the FAU game, I think, is that's the thing I've noticed is how strong this team is. They're not very fast, but they're strong. They're built more like a Minnesota or Wisconsin team, honestly. And I know that's a weird thing to think about and say, but they really are. Purdue didn't have a lot of guys that fly around this. And think about it, even on offense. Let's go further. Purdue didn't have a lot of speed on the outside on offense either. And we become so accustomed as fans to watch Purdue have a weapon that nobody can stay with. Charlie Jones is great, and Charlie Jones is a weapon. I'm not discounting him. But I'm saying Purdue has had speed at receiver in multiple places. And this year, I mean, they've got some quick receivers, and maybe they're just not finding them, but it doesn't look like Purdue has the speed that we're used to watching. But Purdue, man, all of a sudden looks like a team that can run the ball and stop the run. That's pretty darn awesome. Okay, so my expectation, though, is if you say Penn State's a 50-50, and let's remove Syracuse because I was wrong. Purdue loses to Syracuse. I was wrong. But then they beat Minnesota. You're kind of right where you should be or could have been, 3-2. And now if they can handle their business, Brom teams get better. They just get better. They start rolling. They get momentum. They start believing in the system. I don't know why it takes that long for his teams to do that, but they do. So that 3-1 in October is very attainable. It's going to be difficult, but it's very attainable. And if they can do that, you have a season. I was talking to my wife about this. Purdue, as a program, has only had, I think, it's incredible. I think there's only been 3 9-win seasons. I think this is true. 3 or 4 9-win seasons in the history of the program and 1 10-win season. So if you can get up to 8 or 9 wins, you're getting into truly elite territory for Purdue as a football program. And then if we've got some idiots on here in the margin, which some of them step in here, I'm not talking about Purdue fans. I'm talking about people from other schools, other fan bases. That's fine. Here at Boiled Sports, we're a pretty level-headed bunch, and I think that may be why some of you like us and some of you hate us. But we understand the history of Purdue football. Purdue has a 55% winning record as a program. So if you can get to 8 or 9 wins, you're getting in a place that's pretty elite. Jay really wants that 10-win season, and we all do. We want to see it because most of us are too young to remember 1980 well, and that's the last time Purdue finished with 10 wins. But you're watching Kansas right now, and this is the thing that kills Jay. You're watching Kansas right now. It looks like they're on a collision course with a 10-win season. Kansas. Sure, Kansas had to pay for that 10-win season with 10 years of the worst college football of any program. I think I'll take the trade if you have to say, okay, Purdue's going to be kind of mediocre, but every now and again they're going to get up in near 8, 9 wins. I'll take that. And I'm super happy with the way this program looks right now and the way this team looks. I think if they can get healthy, which I think they can in the next 2-3 weeks, boy, watch out. Purdue could be the best team in the conference by the end of the season and not even be playing in Indianapolis because they could lose the West and still, be up there in the 8, 9 wins. So that'd be a pretty good place to be. Todd Singer says Wisconsin is 0-2 in conference, as we all expected. Exactly, Todd. Wisconsin is not a good program or not a good team right now. They're a great program. Not a good team right now. Purdue's got to get that monkey off their back. This is the year. Got to happen. It's got to happen. Let's see. Michael Hogg says Purdue wins on Saturday against Maryland. They're going 4-0 in October. Michael, I appreciate your optimism. You know that. But you also have made some predictions this season that weren't right. So I'm not going to. I appreciate the optimism. I'm not going to tell anybody not to be optimistic. So, yeah, if they go 4-0 in October, that whole quote-unquote special season thing is right back in play. And they're in position to get 9 or 10 wins, which is just incredible. That's awesome. Todd Singer putting a little thumb in my eye right now. Todd, thanks for nothing. Marvin Grant is leading the way for Kansas football to its 10 wins. And Marvin Grant has absolutely been awesome versus Kansas. It stinks. I think everybody liked Marvin Grant. Unfortunately, Marvin didn't like us quite as much. And he ended up at Kansas. He hit hard. He didn't wrap up very well. And that's the funny thing is he's a lot like a lot of Purdue's defensive backs this year. They hit hard, but they don't wrap up guys and drive through them. And Marvin Grant was so good at embarrassing people and just knocking their head off. He's done it a couple times for Kansas this season. It's been noteworthy. He's I don't know if you guys have seen on Twitter. His highlights are pretty awesome, but that's the way he's always been. He's a hard hitter. He wasn't the best guy in coverage, and he wasn't the best tackler. Michael Hogg had one more point, and I think this I should address this before closing out. Purdue had 7 tackles for a loss yesterday, and they were actually getting pressure on Tanner Morgan. That was twofold. Part of that was coverage. Purdue's defensive backs were doing their job. Morgan was not making decisions exceptionally quick. I think he felt like he had all day. That's something AOC has had a problem with, right? Not feeling or sensing pressure or hearing that clock ticking in his head. And ironically, I tell you, one of the key plays yesterday, just keeping Purdue on the field, I think O'Connell had a big, there was a pocket breakdown, and he ran for like 7-8 yards to keep a drive going. It was like opposite day. It doesn't make any sense. Purdue really looked like Minnesota yesterday. They were not doing anything. Oh, I'll tell you what else was huge, guys. I think Purdue had 4 penalties. Let me double check that. They had either 3 or 4, and Minnesota had 3 or 4. It was a very disciplined game, really, on both sides. Stupid football, other than not being able to tackle, stupid football was kind of looked like it was a thing of yesteryear. So that was great to see. That was great to see, and that's a tough thing to cure. But somehow, some way, Purdue looked like a different type of football team. Well, I'm near 30 minutes. I want to say thanks again to our sponsors, Martin Vintage and AJ's. I want to say thank you to you for tuning in live. Let's keep our heads up. This is fun stuff to see Purdue kind of fighting and clawing and scratching their way to a victory, even when they can't get the offense going. That's 2 weeks in a row, really. The FAU game was very similar, where the defensive effort at the end to close it out and the ability for offense to make 1 or 2 big plays made a difference. Sure, you guys and I would prefer them to win a game going away, and they're going to win a couple here this season, just beating the hell out of a team. I really believe that. But, I mean, it's pretty nice to win a road game by just grinding it out. That's really awesome. So have a great day. Enjoy the weather. It's beautiful outside. A little windy from the repercussions of Ian, actually, I'm told. It's windy in Indiana for that. But it's beautiful out. Enjoy a wonderful fall day with your family. God bless you. Hammer down. We'll talk to you soon.